I was
Oh
sitting
my
at my
gosh,
daughter
that is
Olivia's
too
dinner
funny. I
table
can't
when
believe
she
he
looked
said
straight
that. I
at me and
know,
said,
right? The food is great
"Mom,
too.
you can't keep pretending you're
What is the
strong.
meaning of this?
You're alone now." My ex-husband Daniel
It
didn't
means
even
I'm
argue.
married now.
He just nodded like my entire life,
How
30
could you
years of
do this to
sacrifice,
us?
meant nothing.
I demand to
Mark
know why
smirked,
you are wearing
adding,
that ring after
"Maybe it's time you
everything that
sell the
happened.
house. You clearly can't handle things anymore." I felt their eyes on me waiting for me to break. And I almost did. Until the front door opened. A woman I had never seen before stepped inside, calm and composed. She looked at all of them, and then at me. I think she said quietly, "It's time the truth comes out. If this moment made you feel something, stay with me." Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I read every comment. And if you believe the truth always finds its way out, don't forget to like and subscribe. I didn't always look like a woman people could dismiss so easily. There was a time, 30 years to be exact, when everything in our family revolved around me. Not because I demanded it, not because I was loud or controlling, but because I was the one holding everything together, quietly, consistently, invisibly. My name is Chelsea Morales. I was married to Daniel Morales for 3 decades. 30 years of shared meals, shared bills, shared dreams. Or at least, that's what I believed they were. The truth is, I built the life I thought was ours, while Daniel slowly built one that never included me. When we first got married, Daniel didn't have much. He had ambition, sure. Charm, too. He could walk into any room and make people believe in him. I was the one with stability. I worked as a financial coordinator for a mid-sized logistics company in San Antonio. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and I was good at it. I managed budgets. I understood numbers. I planned for the future. And from the very beginning, I applied that same discipline to our home. While Daniel chased opportunities, new jobs, business ideas, connections, I made sure our bills were paid on time. I tracked every expense. I saved every extra dollar. When Olivia was born, I was the one who stayed up late, calculating how we could afford daycare school and eventually college. Daniel liked to tell people he was the provider. And over time, people believed him. Even our own daughter. But what no one ever saw, what no one ever cared to see, was that Daniel's success was built on the foundation I created. When his business ventures failed, it was my savings that kept us afloat. When he switched careers for the 3rd time in 10 years, it was my paycheck that paid the mortgage. I didn't complain. I told myself that was what marriage meant: partnership, support, sacrifice. I just didn't realize I was the only one doing all 3. The first time I suspected something was wrong, it wasn't dramatic. There was no lipstick on a collar, no late-night phone call that gave him away. It was silence. Daniel had always been talkative. Even when he was stressed, he'd fill the house with noise ideas, plans, complaints. But then slowly, he started coming home quieter, distant. He stopped asking about my day, stopped noticing when I changed my hair, stopped noticing me at all. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I had gotten too predictable, too ordinary. 30 years can do that to a marriage if you're not careful. I told myself I just needed to try harder. So I did. I cooked his favorite meals. I planned small weekend trips. I even bought a dress I hadn't worn anything like in years, hoping he'd look at me the way he used to. He barely glanced up from his phone. Looking back now, I realize how hard I fought to hold on to something that was already gone. The truth came out in the most ordinary way possible. Laundry. I was folding his shirts when I found a receipt in his pocket. A restaurant I didn't recognize. A bill for 2 people. Wine dessert. Expensive wine. And a date. A Tuesday afternoon. Daniel had told me he had a client meeting that day. I remember standing there in the laundry room staring at that receipt like it might rewrite itself if I just looked long enough. I didn't confront him immediately. That's something I regret. Instead, I waited. I watched. I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. And once I did, I couldn't unsee it. The late nights became more frequent, the business trips more vague. He started guarding his phone like it held state secrets. And then one night, he forgot to lock it. I didn't even want to look. I wish I could say I was above that I respected his privacy even when something felt wrong. But after 30 years, you know when something isn't right. The messages weren't hidden. They were right there, as if he didn't even care whether I found them. Her name was Vanessa. She was younger. Of course she was. Their conversations weren't just flirtatious, they were intimate, familiar. The kind of conversations that don't happen overnight. The kind that grow over time, quietly replacing something else, replacing me. I didn't cry right away. I didn't scream. I just sat there on the edge of the bed, holding his phone, feeling something inside me go still. Like a part of me had already accepted what my heart was just catching up to. When I finally confronted him, he didn't deny it. That might have hurt more than anything. He just sighed like he was tired of pretending. Chelsea, he said, I didn't want you to find out like this. Not, I'm sorry. Not I made a mistake. Just inconvenience. I remember asking him, how long? He hesitated. Just for a second. About a year. A year. 12 months of lies. Of shared dinners where he looked me in the eye and said everything was fine. Of me planning holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, while he was building a completely separate life. And the worst part, he acted like it was inevitable. Like this was something that just happened. We grew apart, he said. You became so focused on stability, on control. I needed something different. Control. That word stuck with me. All those years of making sure we didn't lose the house, didn't fall into debt, didn't crumble financially. He saw that as control. Not care, not love, control. The divorce wasn't long or complicated. Daniel didn't fight me. In fact, he seemed relieved. He let me keep certain accounts, some savings. The house situation was to be discussed later, he said. At the time, I didn't question it. I was too busy trying to understand how my entire life had unraveled so quietly. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't have imagined, was that the betrayal didn't end with Daniel. It was just the beginning. Because when I thought I had lost my husband, I had no idea I was about to lose something even deeper. My family. After the divorce was finalized, I told myself something simple. Just stay close to your daughter. Everything else will work itself out. That belief was the last illusion I had left. Olivia was the one who insisted I move closer. Mom, you shouldn't be alone right now. She had said, her voice soft, concerned, the kind of tone that makes you feel safe. Come stay near us. We'll help you get back on your feet. At the time, those words felt like a lifeline. I had just lost my husband. My home didn't feel like home anymore. Every room carried memories I didn't know how to carry anymore. So when Olivia offered me a place nearby, just 10 minutes from her house, it felt like the right decision. Like family would catch me before I fell. The first few weeks almost convinced me I had made the right choice. Olivia came by often. She brought groceries, helped me unpack, even stayed late some nights, just sitting with me while we watched old shows. She would ask me how I was doing, and for a moment, I saw the little girl I had raised, the one who used to crawl into my lap when she had nightmares. I held on to that version of her. I needed to. Mark, on the other hand, was polite but distant. He wasn't rude, not exactly, but there was something in the way he looked at me, like I was temporary, like I didn't belong in the life he was building with Olivia. At first, I brushed it off. Not everyone expresses care the same way, I told myself. But slowly, things began to shift. It started with small suggestions. "Mom, why don't you let me handle your bills for a while?" Olivia said one afternoon as we sat at my kitchen table. "You've been through a lot. You don't need the stress." I hesitated. Managing finances had always been my thing. It was the one area of my life where I felt completely in control. Numbers made sense. They were honest, predictable, unlike people. "I don't mind doing it myself," I said gently. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I know you can, but you don't have to anymore. Let me take care of you for once." There was something about the way she said it, soft, reassuring, that made me feel guilty for even questioning it. So I agreed. That was the first mistake. At first, it felt like a relief. Olivia would pay my utilities, organize my statements, make sure everything was on time. She even set up automatic payments so I wouldn't have to think about it. "You deserve to rest, Mom," she would say. And I wanted to believe that. But then slowly I realized something had changed. I didn't have access to my own accounts anymore. It wasn't immediate. It happened in small steps, subtle enough that I didn't question it right away. "My login isn't working," I mentioned one day. "Oh, I updated your passwords to keep everything secure," Olivia replied quickly. "I'll handle it, don't worry." Another time I asked about a bank notification I received. "It's just routine stuff," she said, waving it off. "You don't need to stress about it." At first, I trusted her. She was my daughter. But trust, when misplaced, doesn't break all at once. It cracks. And those cracks started to show in the way Mark began speaking to me. One evening, I was at their house for dinner. Olivia was in the kitchen, and I was helping set the table when Mark walked in, loosened his tie, and looked at me. "You settling in okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "It's been an adjustment." He nodded, but there was a faint smirk on his face. "Well, at least you've got Olivia taking care of things now. Must be nice not having to worry about finances anymore." Something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "I've always managed my own finances," I replied calmly. He raised an eyebrow. "Sure, but things are different now right after the divorce." There it was. That word again. After. As if everything I had been before no longer mattered. As if I had become someone else entirely. "I'm still capable, Mark," I said quietly. He shrugged. "Didn't say you weren't. Just saying. It's probably better this way. Better. For who I didn't respond. I didn't know how to. Because deep down, something inside me had already started to shift from confidence to doubt. Was I still capable? Had I really been the one holding everything together all those years? Or had I just convinced myself of that? That's the thing about being surrounded by people who question your reality. Eventually, you start questioning it too. And Olivia. She didn't correct him. She didn't defend me. She just changed the subject when she came back into the room as if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't just been quietly reduced to something less. Over time, those moments became more frequent. Small comments, subtle looks, decisions made without including me. Olivia started speaking for me in conversations. "Mom doesn't need that. Mom can't handle too much right now. Mom should rest." Each sentence sounded caring on the surface. But underneath, it stripped something away from me, piece by piece. Until one day, I realized something that made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't ignore. I wasn't being helped. I was being managed, controlled, and the worst part, I had let it happen. Because I was tired. Because I was grieving. Because I trusted the wrong people at the wrong time. The moment it truly hit me wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. I was sitting alone in my living room, looking at a letter from the bank. A simple notification. Nothing urgent. But when I tried to log in to check it myself, I couldn't. Again. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Then I picked up my phone and called Olivia. "Hey, Mom," she answered, cheerful. "I need my account access," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. Why, she asked. Why? Not, of course. Not, I'll send it right now. Just... Why? I just want to check something, I replied. I already checked everything she said. There's nothing you need to worry about. That sentence. That tone. Something inside me shifted completely. Because in that moment, I didn't feel like a mother being cared for. I felt like a child being dismissed. And that's when a quiet, uncomfortable thought crossed my mind for the very first time. What else don't I know? The first time I noticed the money was missing. I told myself it had to be a mistake. Not because the numbers didn't add up, but because I wasn't ready to accept what those numbers might mean. It was a quiet Sunday morning. I had woken up earlier than usual, the kind of early that comes from a restless night rather than a good night's sleep. The house felt too quiet, too still. I made myself coffee and sat down at the small dining table by the window, the same table where Olivia had once sat across from me promising to take care of everything. That phrase echoed in my mind more often than I wanted to admit. I picked up my phone and opened the bank notification again. It was simple, just a standard alert. A transaction had been completed, but the amount, it didn't feel standard. I stared at it longer this time. $4,200. I frowned. That wasn't a bill I recognized. It wasn't a recurring payment. It wasn't anything I had authorized, at least not that I could remember. My first instinct wasn't suspicion. It was doubt. Did I forget something? That question came so naturally, it scared me. Because it wasn't just about the money. It was about me. About whether I could still trust my own memory. I took a slow breath and tried to stay calm. There had to be a reasonable explanation. There always was. I reached for my laptop and tried to log into my bank account again. Same result. Access denied. I sat there for a moment, fingers resting on the keyboard, feeling a slow creeping unease settle into my chest. This wasn't the first time, but this time, it felt different, because now there was a number attached to it, a real tangible loss. I picked up my phone and called Olivia. She answered on the third ring. "Hey, Mom." Her voice sounded normal. Light. Unbothered. "I need you to check something for me," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "Sure, what is it?" "There's a transaction. $4,200. I don't recognize it." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. "Oh," she said finally. That, as if it were something small, something obvious. "What do you mean, that?" I asked. "It's just a transfer," she replied casually. I moved some funds around to cover a few things. A few things I repeated. "Yeah, you know, expenses. You've had a lot going on. I didn't want to bother you with every detail." My grip tightened around the phone. "Olivia, that's a large amount of money." I know she said, her voice still calm. "But it's handled. You don't need to worry about it." There it was again. You don't need to worry. The same phrase she always used. The same phrase that was starting to feel less like reassurance and more like dismissal. I'd like to know what it was for, I said. Another pause. This one slightly longer. Mom, I'm in the middle of something right now, she said. Can we talk about this later? No, I said more firmly than I expected. I need to understand this now. Silence, then a small sigh. It went towards some household expenses, she said. Things that benefit you too, by the way. Household expenses, I repeated. But this is my account, Olivia, and I'm managing it for you, she replied, her tone shifting just slightly. Remember? Something inside me tightened. Yes, I said slowly. But managing doesn't mean making decisions without telling me. I am telling you, she said, a hint of irritation creeping in. After the fact. Another pause, and then, for the first time, her voice changed completely. Mom, she said more sharply, now you asked me to help. I'm helping. If you're going to question every decision I make, then maybe you should handle everything yourself again. The words hit harder than they should have, because they carried something underneath them, not just frustration, control. I swallowed. That's not what I'm saying, I replied quietly. I just want transparency. You're getting it, she insisted. No, I said. I'm getting explanations after the money is already gone. There was a long silence on the other end. Then finally, look, she said, her tone softer again, but not warm. You've been through a lot. I'm trying to make things easier for you. Why can't you just trust me? Trust. That word again. It used to feel simple. Now it felt complicated. I do trust you, I said, and I meant it. Or at least, I wanted to, but trust doesn't mean not asking questions. Another silence, this one heavier. I have to go, she said abruptly. We'll talk later. The call ended before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling a strange mix of emotions I couldn't quite sort through. Confusion, frustration, and something else. Something quieter. Something colder. Doubt. Not just about the money, but about everything. I set the phone down slowly and looked around my small living room. It felt different now. Not unsafe, but unfamiliar. Like I was living inside a version of my life that I no longer fully understood. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the empty street. For years, I had trusted numbers more than anything. Numbers didn't lie. They told you exactly what was happening if you were willing to look closely enough. And now, the numbers were telling me something I couldn't ignore anymore. Money was leaving my account. Large amounts. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. And every time I asked about it, I was made to feel like I was the problem. I pressed my lips together, trying to steady my thoughts. There had to be a logical explanation. There always was. But logic requires information. And right now, I had none. Just fragments. Just feelings. Just a growing sense that something was very, very wrong. I walked back to the table and picked up the bank letter again. This time, I read it more carefully. Every line, every detail. And that's when I noticed something that made my heart skip. At the bottom of the page, there was a reference number. And next to it, a name. Not mine. Not exactly. But close enough that someone who wasn't paying attention might not notice the difference. I leaned in closer, my eyes narrowing. The signature attached to the transaction. It looked like mine, but it wasn't. Not quite. The letters were slightly off. The spacing was wrong. Subtle, but intentional. A copy, a careful imitation. My breath caught in my throat. Because in that moment, the doubt disappeared, and in its place came something far more dangerous. Certainty. Someone wasn't just using my money. Someone was pretending to be me. And suddenly, the question wasn't, what else don't I know? It was, how long has this been happening? That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd had with Olivia over the past few months. Every, don't worry about it. Every, I'll handle it. Every moment I had chosen to step back. Because I thought I was being cared for. Now those same moments felt different, calculated. I turned onto my side and closed my eyes, but the image of that signature wouldn't leave me. My name almost perfectly written, but not quite right. Someone had practiced it. That realization settled into my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a simple mistake. It was deliberate. And yet, even with that certainty, a part of me hesitated. Because the alternative, the truth I was starting to see, was something I didn't want to believe. That my own family could be behind this. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront anyone, not yet, not without knowing more. For years, I had trusted emotions to guide me in my relationships. But when it came to money, I trusted facts. So I went back to what I knew. I started with the only thing I had access to: paper. Old statements, printed documents, anything I had saved before Olivia took over my accounts. I pulled out a small box from the closet, one I hadn't touched since the move. Inside were folders neatly labeled in my handwriting. Years of records, bills, tax returns, bank summaries, proof of a life I had carefully managed. I sat on the floor and started going through them one by one. At first, everything looked normal. Balances, transfers, expenses. But as I moved closer to the present, the patterns began to shift. There were gaps. Months where I had no printed statements because by then, everything had gone digital. Months where Olivia had already taken control. I frowned and flipped through the pages again, slower this time. And then I saw it. A withdrawal. Not recent. 3 months ago. $2,800. My breath caught. I hadn't noticed it then. Or maybe I hadn't been allowed to. I quickly scanned the rest of the documents. Another one. $1,500. Then another. $3,200. All spaced out just enough to avoid raising immediate concern. But together, they added up. Too much. Far too much. My hands began to tremble slightly as I placed the papers down. This wasn't new. This had been happening for months, and I hadn't seen it. Because I hadn't been allowed to see it. A sharp knock on the door startled me. I quickly gathered the papers into a pile and stood up, my heart racing. When I opened the door, Olivia stood there holding a grocery bag. "Hey, Mom," she said with a smile, as if nothing had changed. "I brought you some things." I forced a small smile in return. "Thank you." She stepped inside without waiting, setting the bag on the counter. "You okay?" she asked, glancing at me. "You sound a little off on the phone yesterday." "I'm fine," I said. A lie. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. She looked around the room briefly. Then her eyes landed on the stack of papers on the table. "What's that?" she asked casually. Just old documents? I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. I was organizing. She walked over and picked one up before I could stop her. Her eyes scanned it quickly, and for a split second, something changed in her expression. It was subtle, but I saw it. Tension. Then just as quickly, it disappeared. You don't need to go through all this, she said, placing the paper back down. It's outdated. I just wanted to review a few things I said. She crossed her arms. Mom, we've already talked about this. You don't need to stress yourself out with finances right now. I'm not stressed, I replied. I'm just checking. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Checking what? There it was again. That question. Not concern. Not curiosity. Interrogation. Just my accounts, I said. I told you I'm handling that. She said, her tone sharpening slightly. I know, I replied calmly. But I'd still like to understand what's happening with my money. She let out a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. Your money, she repeated. The way she said it made something inside me go cold. Yes, I said quietly. My money. She shook her head slightly as if I were being unreasonable. Mom, everything I'm doing is for you. For your stability. My stability doesn't require secrecy, I said. Her eyes flashed. It's not secrecy, it's efficiency. No, I said. Efficiency doesn't involve transactions I don't recognize. Silence filled the room. Heavy, uncomfortable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she exhaled slowly and softened her tone again. Look, she said, stepping closer. I think you're overwhelmed. Everything that's happened with Dad? It's a lot. You're probably just misremembering things. There it was. That word. Misremembering. Gaslighting. I felt it clearly now. Not as confusion, but as a tactic. A way to make me doubt myself. And suddenly, something inside me snapped into place. I'm not misremembering, I said quietly. She held my gaze for a moment, then looked away. Okay, she said lightly, if that's how you feel. But her voice didn't match her words. There was something underneath it, something defensive, something nervous. She grabbed her bag and headed toward the door. I'll come by later, she said. Try not to overthink things, okay? The door closed behind her before I could respond. I stood there in silence, staring at the space she had just left behind. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from clarity. Because for the first time, I wasn't confused. I wasn't doubting myself. I wasn't wondering if I was imagining things. I knew something was being taken from me, and the people closest to me were the ones doing it. I turned back toward the table, my eyes landing on the stack of documents. This wasn't going to stop on its own, and I wasn't going to sit back and let it happen anymore. If they thought I was weak, if they thought I wouldn't notice, if they thought I wouldn't fight back, they were wrong. But I needed proof. Real proof. Because feelings wouldn't protect me. Questions wouldn't protect me. Only facts would. And somewhere in those numbers, the truth was waiting. I didn't go to Olivia's house for 3 days after that. Not because I was afraid of what she might say, but because I was afraid of what I might see. Once doubt turns into suspicion, everything changes. Every look feels different. Every word sounds like it carries something underneath it. And I needed time to think clearly, time to separate what I felt from what I could actually prove. But the truth has a way of finding you, even when you're not ready for it. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Ethan showed up at my door. He never came alone. Not at that hour. Not without Olivia. So when I opened the door and saw him standing there, backpack hanging off one shoulder, eyes darting behind him like he was checking if someone had followed, I felt something tighten in my chest. "Ethan," I said softly. "What are you doing here? Can I come in?" he asked quickly. His voice wasn't just quiet. It was tense. I stepped aside immediately. Of course. He walked in without saying another word, moving past me into the living room. I closed the door behind him and watched as he stood there, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He looked nervous. Not like a kid who got in trouble at school, like someone carrying something heavier than he knew how to handle. "What's wrong?" I asked gently. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the windows, then back at me. "Are you alone?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice lowering instinctively. "What's going on?" He swallowed. "I wasn't supposed to come here," he said. My heart skipped. "Why?" He hesitated again. Then finally, "Because Mom and Dad don't want me talking to you about stuff." Stuff. The word felt small. Too small. I stepped closer to him. "Ethan," I said softly, "you can tell me anything. You know that, right?" He nodded, but his eyes were still uncertain. "I don't want to get in trouble," he said. "You won't, I promised. Not with me." That seemed to give him just enough courage. He took a breath. "Grandma, you don't know everything they've been doing." The room went completely still. For a moment, I couldn't speak, because hearing it out loud from him made everything real in a way I hadn't been ready for. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. He looked down at his hands. "I've seen things," he said. "At night, when they think I'm asleep." My chest tightened. "What kind of things?" He hesitated again. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "They practice your signature." Silence. Not the quiet kind. The kind that feels like it's pressing in on you from all sides. I felt my breath catch, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Practice," I repeated. He nodded. "Dad prints out papers sometimes," he said, "and Mom sits there and copies your name over and over again, like she's trying to make it look perfect." A chill ran through me, because it matched exactly what I had seen. That almost perfect signature, that slight difference. "That's not all," Ethan added quickly, as if he needed to get everything out before he lost his nerve. I felt my pulse quicken. "What else?" "They talk about money," he said, "a lot. How, like they're planning something," he said. "They say things like, 'Once everything is transferred,' or 'she won't notice.'" Each word landed like a weight. "She won't notice." I closed my eyes for a brief second, steadying myself. "Did they say anything else?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "They said you wouldn't fight back." That hurt more than I expected. Not because it was surprising, but because it confirmed something I had been trying not to see. They didn't just think I was vulnerable. They were counting on it. "Ethan," I said gently, kneeling down, so I was at his level. "Why are you telling me this?" He looked at me, his eyes suddenly filled with something deeper than fear. Guilt. "Because it's wrong," he said quietly. "And nobody else is saying anything." My throat tightened. That one sentence said more than anything else could have. Nobody else is saying anything, which meant they all knew. Or at least, they chose not to know. I reached out and placed my hand over his. "You did the right thing," I said softly. He nodded, but he didn't look relieved. He looked worried. "What are you going to do?" he asked. That question lingered in the air between us. What was I going to do? A few days ago, I would have said I needed more time, more information, more certainty. But now I had something I didn't have before. Not just suspicion, not just patterns, but a witness. A child who had seen things no child should have to see. "I'm going to be careful," I said finally. He frowned slightly. "Careful?" "Yes," I said, "because if what you're telling me is true, then I need to make sure I handle this the right way." He nodded slowly. "Are you going to tell Mom?" "No," I said immediately. The answer came faster than I expected. But it was the only answer that made sense. Not yet. Not without proof they couldn't deny. Not without something stronger than words. Because if I confronted them now, they would deny it. They would twist it. They would make me question myself again. And I couldn't let that happen. Not anymore. "Okay," Ethan said quietly. He stood up, adjusting his backpack. "I should go," he added. "They'll notice if I'm gone too long." I walked him to the door, my mind racing with everything he had said. Before he stepped out, he turned back to me. "Grandma?" "Yes, you're not weak," he said. The words hit me harder than anything else that day, because they came from the one person in that house who still saw me clearly. "Thank you," I whispered. He gave me a small nod, then walked away. I closed the door slowly and leaned against it, my heart pounding. The room felt different now. Not uncertain, not confusing, clear, painfully clear. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was a plan. A deliberate, calculated plan. And I had been standing right in the middle of it, without realizing. I pushed myself away from the door and walked back to the table. The papers were still there. The numbers. The patterns. The evidence waiting to be uncovered. I picked them up again, my hands steady this time. Because now I wasn't looking for answers. I was building a case. And somewhere in all of this was the truth that would expose everything. That night, I spread everything out across my dining table. Every document, every receipt, every statement I still had. For years, this had been my strength patterns, numbers, details others overlooked. And now, for the first time in a long time, I felt something familiar returning. Control. Not over them, but over myself. I sat down slowly, a pen in my hand, and began writing. Dates, amounts, anything that didn't feel right. At first, it was overwhelming. The numbers blurred together, and my mind kept drifting back to Ethan's voice. "They practice your signature." That sentence echoed louder than anything else, because it meant one thing: intent. This wasn't careless. This wasn't accidental. This was planned. I forced myself to focus. One transaction at a time. 3 months ago, $2,800. 2.5 months ago, $1,500. 2 months ago, $3,200. Last month, $4,200. I paused, staring at the list. each one spaced out just enough. Just small enough to avoid triggering alarms, just large enough to matter. I circled the amount slowly. Then I added them up. The total made my stomach drop. Over $11,000. Gone. And that was only what I could see. I leaned back in my chair, pressing my fingers against my temples. For a moment, anger threatened to take over. Hot, sharp, immediate. But I pushed it down. Anger would make me react, and reacting would ruin everything. I needed to think, carefully, strategically. Because if Olivia and Mark were doing this, they were counting on me to do exactly what I had always done. Trust, forgive, stay quiet. But that version of me was gone. I reached for the bank letter again, the one with the signature that wasn't quite mine. This time, I looked at it differently. Not as a victim, but as someone building evidence. The signature was close, too close for a stranger. Which meant it had to be someone who had seen me sign documents before, someone who had access, someone who had watched me enough times to imitate the rhythm of my handwriting. My hand tightened around the paper. Olivia. The realization no longer felt like a question. It felt like a conclusion. But conclusions weren't enough. I needed proof that no one could deny. Because if I walked into that house and accused them now, they would turn it against me, just like they always had. You're confused. You're overwhelmed. You're imagining things. And for a moment, I had believed them. Not anymore. I stood up abruptly and walked to the closet, pulling out another box I hadn't touched yet. Inside were older legal documents, property papers, insurance forms, anything that required my signature over the years. I brought them back to the table and began laying them out side by side. My real signature, over and over again, consistent, natural. Then I placed the bank document next to them. The difference was subtle, but now that I knew what to look for, it was obvious. The spacing was slightly off. The final stroke of the S in Morales didn't curve the same way. It was practiced, but not lived. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me, because this right here was something real, something concrete, something they couldn't explain away with words. I picked up my phone. For a moment, I considered calling Olivia, demanding answers. But then I remembered Ethan's face, the fear in his voice, and I stopped myself. No, not yet. Instead, I opened my contacts and scrolled. There was one place I needed to go next: the bank. If there were records, if there were authorizations, if someone had been acting on my behalf, the bank would know. Or at least, someone there would. The next morning, I dressed more carefully than I had in weeks. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I needed to remind myself who I was. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't confused. I wasn't weak. I was Chelsea Morales. And for 30 years, I had managed every dollar that came in and out of my household. I grabbed my folder of documents, my notes, and the bank letter. Then I drove. The bank building stood exactly the same as it always had: clean, neutral, unassuming. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, staring at the entrance. This was it, the moment where suspicion would either turn into truth or fall apart completely. I stepped out of the car and walked inside. The air conditioning hit me immediately, along with the familiar quiet hum of transactions and low conversations. For a second, it felt almost normal. Like I was just another customer handling routine business. But nothing about this was routine. I approached the front desk. "Good morning," the woman behind the counter said politely. "Good morning," I replied. "I need to speak with someone about my account." Of course, she said. Do you have an appointment? No, I said. But it's important. She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Let me see who's available. A few minutes later, I was led into a small office. A man in his early 50s stood up as I entered. Mrs. Morales? He asked. Yes. I'm Jonathan Reed, he said, extending his hand. How can I help you today? I shook his hand and sat down across from him. For a moment, I didn't speak. I just placed the folder on the desk and opened it slowly. I believe I said carefully that there have been transactions made on my account that I did not authorize. His expression didn't change immediately, but I noticed something subtle, a flicker. Concern. Okay, he said, his tone professional. Let's take a look. I handed him the documents, the statements, the list I had written, and finally, the letter with the signature. He took his time, reading, comparing. His silence stretched longer than I expected, long enough to make my heart start beating faster. Finally, he looked up at me. Mrs. Morales, he said slowly. Have you given anyone authorization to act on your behalf? The question hung in the air. I thought about Olivia, about the way she had taken over everything, about the passwords, the access. I trusted my daughter to help manage things, I said carefully. But I did not authorize this. He nodded slowly. Then he looked back down at the documents, and that's when his expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. His posture stiffened slightly. His eyes lingered longer on certain pages. Mr. Reed, I asked quietly. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he closed the folder gently and placed both hands on top of it. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time since I had walked into that building, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not confusion, not doubt, recognition, as if he already knew. Mrs. Morales, he said carefully, I think we need to go over your account in more detail. My heart began to pound, because in that moment, I knew this was bigger than I thought, and whatever I was about to hear next was going to change everything. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until Mr. Reed opened the folder again. The quiet in that office felt heavier than anything I had experienced in days. It wasn't the kind of silence filled with confusion or hesitation. It was the kind that comes when someone knows more than they're ready to say. Can you walk me through these transactions? He asked, his tone measured. I wish I could, I replied. That's the problem. I can't. He nodded slowly, then turned his monitor slightly toward himself, typing something into the system. The clicking of the keyboard sounded louder than it should have. Each keystroke felt like it was pulling something hidden closer to the surface. After a moment, he stopped. Then he leaned back slightly in his chair, studying the screen. His expression tightened, not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. What is it I asked? He hesitated, not because he didn't know, but because he was choosing how much to say. Mrs. Morales, he began carefully according to our records. There is an authorized user linked to your account. My heart skipped. Authorized? I repeated. Yes, he said. Someone who has been granted permission to perform transactions on your behalf. I felt the air shift around me. I never signed anything like that, I said. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he clicked again, then turned the screen slightly toward me. Is this your signature? He asked. I leaned forward. There it was again. My name, written in that almost perfect imitation. The same slight flaw. The same hesitation in the final stroke. No, I said firmly. That's not mine. He nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer. The authorization form was processed about 4 months ago, he said. It lists Olivia Carter as the authorized user. Even though I already knew, hearing it out loud felt different, heavier, more real. My daughter, I said quietly. Yes, I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. And she's been able to access everything. Mr. Reed glanced back at the screen. Not everything, he said, but enough to move funds, initiate transfers, and make certain financial decisions. My hands tightened in my lap. Without my direct confirmation, he hesitated again. In most cases, yes, the authorization would allow that. A cold wave washed over me, because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was access, control, power. And these transactions, I said slowly, the ones I showed you, they were all made under that authorization. He nodded. Yes. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Every instinct I had been trying to suppress, every doubt I had been pushing aside, it was all coming together. But that authorization isn't valid, I said. The signature is forged. Mr. Reed met my eyes. I understand your concern, he said carefully. And based on what I'm seeing, there are irregularities. Irregularities, I repeated. He chose his words carefully. The signature does not perfectly match your previous records, he said. And there are patterns in the transactions that suggest coordinated activity. Coordinated. That word echoed in my mind, because it meant this wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was intentional. How much, I asked quietly. He looked back at the screen, typing again. Then he paused. His expression shifted again, this time more noticeably. Mr. Reed, I said, my voice tightening. How much? He exhaled slowly. Based on the transactions linked to the authorized user, he said the total amount transferred over the past 4 months is approximately $27,000. The number hit me like a physical force. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 27, I whispered. More than double what I had found. More than double what I had prepared myself for. That includes direct withdrawals, transfers to external accounts, and a few larger transactions that were broken into smaller amounts, he added. I closed my eyes briefly, because now I understood why the amounts had seemed random, why they had been spaced out. They weren't trying to hide everything. They were trying to hide just enough. I opened my eyes again. Where did the money go? I asked. Mr. Reed shook his head slightly. I can see the destination accounts, he said, but I would need to initiate a formal investigation to provide full details. Then do it, I said immediately. He held my gaze for a moment. There's a process, he said. We would need to file a fraud claim review, the authorization documents, and it's fraud, I said, my voice firmer now. You said yourself the signature doesn't match. He didn't argue, but he didn't rush either. Because unlike me, he wasn't driven by emotion. He was driven by procedure. I'm not dismissing your claim, he said calmly, but I need to follow the proper steps to ensure everything is handled correctly. I took a breath, forcing myself to stay composed. This wasn't the moment to lose control. This was the moment to be precise. What do you need from me? I asked. He nodded slightly as if relieved by the shift in my tone. I'll need you to sign a formal dispute, he said. We'll also need to compare your verified signature with the authorization form, review transaction logs, and potentially involve our internal fraud department and the police, I asked. That made him pause. If the investigation confirms fraudulent activity, he said carefully, then yes, law enforcement would likely be involved. Likely. Not definite. Not yet. I nodded slowly. Then let's start the process. He reached for a form and placed it in front of me. As I picked up the pen, my hand felt steady, stronger than it had in days. Because this right here was something they couldn't talk their way out of. This was documentation, evidence, truth. I signed my name slowly, deliberately. The real version. The one they had tried and failed to replicate. As I handed the form back to him, he looked at it briefly, then placed it with the rest of the documents. "We'll begin the review immediately," he said. "And Mrs. Morales? Yes, you may want to be cautious moving forward." I met his eyes. "I already am." He nodded. "Good." I gathered my folder and stood up, my mind already moving ahead. Because now everything had changed. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It wasn't even just proof. It was official, documented, recognized, and somewhere beyond that bank office, Olivia and Mark were still acting like everything was under control, like I didn't know, like I wouldn't act. I walked out of the building into the sunlight, feeling something settle inside me. Not anger, not fear, something sharper, something clearer. Resolve. Because now it wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about exposing them. And this time, I wasn't walking into it blind. I didn't go home right away after leaving the bank. Instead, I sat in my car, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead without really seeing anything. $27,000. The number echoed in my mind like something unreal. Too large to ignore, too deliberate to excuse. But more than the money, it was the betrayal behind it. Because numbers don't just disappear on their own. People make them disappear. And now I knew exactly who those people were. Still, knowing and accepting are two different things. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a slow breath. Olivia, my daughter, the little girl who used to hold my hand crossing the street, the teenager I stayed up all night with when she was sick, the woman I trusted, enough to give control of my life to. And now, she had taken that trust and used it against me. My fingers tightened slightly on the wheel. I wasn't going to cry. Not here. Not now. Because tears wouldn't change anything. Action would. I reached for my phone. For a moment, I hesitated. Because once I made this call, there was no going back. No pretending. No, maybe I misunderstood. This would be confrontation. Direct. Unavoidable. I pressed her name. The phone rang twice before she answered. "Hey, Mom." Her voice sounded normal. Too normal. "I need to see you," I said. A pause. "Is everything okay?" "No," I replied. "It's not." Another pause. Longer this time. "What's going on?" she asked. "I'd rather talk in person," I said. "I'm coming over." Before she could respond, I ended the call. I didn't want excuses. I didn't want her preparing a story. I needed to see her reaction in real time, because sometimes the truth shows itself in silence. The drive to her house felt shorter than usual, or maybe I just didn't notice the time passing. My mind was too focused on what was about to happen. When I pulled into the driveway, Mark's car was already there. Of course it was. I stepped out, grabbing my folder from the passenger seat. This wasn't going to be emotional. This was going to be precise. I walked up to the front door and knocked. Olivia opened it almost immediately. She must have been waiting. "Mom," she said, forcing a small smile. "You look serious." "I am," I replied. She stepped aside to let me in. Mark was in the living room, sitting on the couch, his expression shifting the moment he saw me. "Everything all right?" he asked casually. No, I said again. I walked past them and placed my folder on the coffee table. Neither of them spoke. They just watched me, waiting. I turned to face them, my heart steady now. $27,000, I said. The words landed between us like something heavy. Olivia's expression froze. Mark didn't move. What are you talking about? Olivia asked. Her tone was controlled. Too controlled. I went to the bank, I said. That was enough. I saw it immediately. The flicker in her eyes, the shift in Mark's posture, small but undeniable. And Mark asked, leaning back slightly. And they showed me everything I said, the transactions, the authorization, the signatures. Silence. Then Olivia laughed softly. Not naturally, not convincingly. Mom, I think you're misunderstanding something, she said. No, I replied calmly. I'm not. I opened the folder and pulled out the documents, placing them on the table one by one. The authorization form, I said, pointing to it. This isn't my signature. Olivia didn't look at it. Mark did, briefly. Then he looked away. It looks like your signature, Olivia said. It's not, I said. You signed a lot of things over the years. Mom, she added, maybe you just don't remember? Don't, I said, sharply. The word cut through the room. For a moment, neither of them spoke, because they hadn't heard that tone from me before. I'm not confused, I continued, my voice steady again. And I'm not misremembering. Olivia's expression hardened slightly. Then what are you saying? She asked. I met her eyes. I'm saying someone forged my signature, I said. Another silence, this one heavier, and used it to access my account. I continued, to transfer money, to take control of my finances. Mark shifted slightly in his seat. That's a serious accusation, he said. It's a serious situation, I replied. Olivia crossed her arms. You're accusing your own daughter of fraud, she said. I didn't answer immediately, because the truth was sitting right in front of me. Yes, I said finally. The word hung in the air, simple, direct, irreversible. Her eyes widened slightly, not in shock, but in something closer to anger. That's unbelievable, she said, after everything I've done for you. Everything you've done? I interrupted. Yes, she snapped. I took care of you when you had nothing. I managed everything when you couldn't. When I couldn't, I repeated. She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was enough. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. No, I said. That's exactly what you meant. The room felt smaller now, tighter, because the truth was no longer hidden. It was right there, between us. You thought I wouldn't notice, I said. That's not true, she replied immediately. Then what is, I asked? She didn't answer. Mark leaned forward slightly. Look, he said, his tone calmer, more calculated. There's clearly been a misunderstanding. Maybe some paperwork got mixed up. $27,000 isn't a mix-up, I said. His jaw tightened. We were managing your money for you, he said. Managing doesn't mean taking, I replied. We used it for expenses, Olivia said quickly. Things that benefit you too, without telling me, I asked. She didn't respond, because there was no answer that could justify it. I took a slow breath. This is being investigated, I said. That changed everything. I saw it immediately. The shift, the tension. The bank is reviewing everything, I continued. And if they confirm fraud, I let the sentence hang. I didn't need to finish it. They already knew. You went to the bank? Olivia asked, her voice quieter now. Yes. Another silence, this one filled with something new. Fear, not mine, theirs. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected me to push back. They hadn't expected me to fight, which meant they had underestimated me, and that was their biggest mistake. I looked at them both, my voice calm but unshakable. This isn't over, I said, and for the first time since all of this began, I saw something in their eyes I hadn't seen before. Not control, not confidence, but uncertainty, because the woman they thought they knew, the one they thought they could manipulate, was gone. The silence after my words lingered longer than I expected, not because they didn't understand what I was saying, but because they were trying to figure out how much I actually knew. Olivia was the first to move. She uncrossed her arms slowly, exhaling as if she were trying to calm herself down. Okay, she said, her tone shifting again, less defensive, more controlled. Let's just slow down for a second. I didn't respond. I just watched her. Because I had seen this version of her before. The one that didn't panic. The one that adjusted, calculated. You're upset, she continued. And I understand that. But this doesn't have to turn into something bigger than it is. Something bigger than it is. $27,000. Forged signatures. Manipulated accounts. And she still thought she could minimize it. It already is something big, I said quietly. Mark leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Chelsea, he said, using my name for the first time, we never intended for this to look bad. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Then what did you intend, I asked. He hesitated. Just enough. We were managing your finances, he said. Like Olivia said, making sure everything stayed stable. Stable, I repeated. Yes, he said. After the divorce, things were uncertain. You were vulnerable. We stepped in to help. Vulnerable. That word again. Only now it sounded different. Not like concern, like justification. I didn't ask you to take my money, I said. You didn't have to, Olivia replied quickly. We could see what was happening. What was happening? I asked. You were struggling, she said. Emotionally, mentally. You weren't in a position to make good financial decisions. I stared at her. Because in that moment, I saw it clearly. This wasn't just about money. This was about how they saw me. Weak, unstable, replaceable. So you decided to take control, I said. We decided to protect you, she corrected. By forging my signature, I asked. Her jaw tightened. That's not what happened, she said. Then explain it to me, I said calmly. Because the bank already has their version. That hit. I saw it. The flicker of panic she couldn't hide this time. Mark noticed it too. He sat up straighter, his tone sharpening slightly. What exactly did you tell the bank, he asked. Enough, I replied. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting, I said, because now I understood something important. They weren't just afraid of me. They were afraid of what I had set in motion. You shouldn't have done that, Olivia said suddenly. The words came out faster than she intended, and there it was. Not guilt, not regret. Blame. I tilted my head slightly. I shouldn't have reported money being taken from my account, I asked. That's not what I mean, she said quickly. Then what do you mean? She hesitated again, because she couldn't say it out loud, not without revealing exactly what she was thinking. Mark stepped in. This is going to create complications, he said. Legal complications, financial complications, things that don't just affect you. I let that sit for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been building inside me since the bank. Where did the money go? Silence. Neither of them answered. I stepped closer. $27,000, I said. Where did it go? Olivia looked at Mark. Mark looked back at her. And in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not confidence, not control, uncertainty, because they hadn't prepared for this part. It was used, Olivia said finally. For what I asked. For expenses, she repeated. What expenses, I pressed. She didn't answer immediately. And that hesitation told me everything. It wasn't for me, I said. Her eyes flickered. You live comfortably, I continued. Your bills are paid. Your house is fine. So don't tell me it was for my benefit. Mom, don't, I said. My voice was calm, but it carried something new. Finality. Just tell me the truth. Another long silence. Then finally, Mark spoke. It went toward investments, he said. The word hung in the air. Investments. My stomach tightened. What kind of investments, I asked. Opportunities, he said vaguely. Be specific. He exhaled, clearly irritated now. Business opportunities, he said. Things that could grow. Multiply. Turn into something bigger. With my money, I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Yes, Olivia said quietly. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, I didn't see my daughter. I saw someone else entirely, someone who had convinced herself that what she was doing was justified. You used my money, I said slowly without my permission, to fund your own investments. It's not like that, she said. It's exactly like that, I replied. We were going to pay you back, she said quickly. When I asked, she didn't answer, because there was no answer, because that had never been the plan. Do you have any idea what you've done? I asked. Her expression shifted again, from defensive to something else. Frustration. You're acting like we stole from you, she said. The words hit harder than anything else, because they weren't defensive. They were honest. That's exactly how she saw it. Not as theft, as entitlement. Yes, I said quietly. That's exactly what you did. Mark stood up now, his patience clearly gone. This conversation isn't going anywhere, he said. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. I've never been more clear, I said. He shook his head. This is going to blow up into something unnecessary, he said. Lawyers, investigations. It's going to hurt everyone. Everyone. Not just me. Not just the person who lost everything. Everyone. Maybe it should I said? That stopped him. Because that wasn't the answer he expected. I'm not going to pretend this didn't happen, I continued. I'm not going to protect you from the consequences of your choices. Olivia's face went pale. Mom! No, I said. You don't get to call me that right now. The words came out before I could stop them, but I didn't take them back, because they were true. You made your decisions, I said. Now you live with them." The room fell silent again. But this time, it felt different. Because the balance had shifted. They weren't in control anymore. They weren't guiding the conversation. They weren't shaping the narrative. I was. And for the first time since all of this began, they didn't know what to do next. I picked up my folder slowly. "This is far from over," I said, and as I walked toward the door, I could feel their eyes on me, not with confidence, not with control, but with something they hadn't expected to feel. Fear. I didn't expect them to come after me so quickly, but I underestimated something. Not their intelligence, their desperation. It started that same evening. I had barely set my bag down when my phone rang again. Olivia's name flashed across the screen, followed immediately by a message. "We need to talk, please." I didn't respond, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew exactly what this was. Damage control. And I wasn't ready to give them that yet. Instead, I sat at my table, reopening the folder, reviewing everything one more time. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to remind myself of the truth. The real truth. Not the version they would try to sell me. The numbers didn't change. The signatures didn't change. The facts didn't change. Only their story would. And right on cue, the doorbell rang. I froze for a moment. Then I stood up slowly and walked toward the door. I already knew who it was. When I opened it, Olivia was standing there, alone. Her face looked different, not angry, not defensive, tired, and something else. "Careful. Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked in slowly, glancing around like she hadn't been in this space before. Or maybe, like she was seeing it differently now. She didn't sit right away. She just stood there, hands clasped together. "I didn't think you'd come," I said. "I had to," she replied. There was a pause. Then she exhaled and sat down. "I think things got out of control," she said. I didn't respond, because I wasn't interested in vague statements. "What exactly got out of control?" I asked. She looked up at me. "Our intentions," she said. "The situation. Everything." "That's still vague," I replied. She pressed her lips together. "Okay," she said. "I'll be direct." Good, because I wasn't going to accept anything less. "We didn't plan it the way it turned out," she said. "At first, it really was about helping you." I tilted my head slightly. "Helping me by taking my money." Her eyes flickered. "No," she said. "At first it was just managing things, paying bills, keeping everything organized." "That's not what happened," I said. She nodded. I know, she admitted. The admission was small, but it mattered. "Then what changed?" I asked. She hesitated. Then she looked away. "Mark had an opportunity," she said quietly. "Of course he did." "What kind of opportunity?" I asked. "A business deal," she said. "Something he believed in. Something that could grow fast." "With my money," I said. She nodded. "Yes." The word landed between us like something fragile, but it didn't break anything, because everything was already broken. "He said it was temporary," she continued, "that we would use some funds, grow it, and return everything before you even noticed." Before I even noticed. There it was again. That assumption that I wouldn't see, that I wouldn't understand, that I wouldn't matter. "And you believed him," I said. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I walked over slowly and sat across from her. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I asked. She looked up. "This isn't about money," I said. "It's about trust." Her eyes softened slightly. "I know," she said. "No," I replied. "You don't, because if she did, we wouldn't be here. You didn't just take money," I continued. "You took control of my life. You made decisions for me. You treated me like I wasn't capable of thinking for myself." "That's not how I saw it," she said quickly. "Then how did you see it?" She hesitated again. And then she said something I wasn't prepared for. "I thought you needed me," she said. The words hit harder than any excuse, because they weren't defensive. They were honest. "I did need you," I said quietly. "But not like that." She looked down. "I didn't realize how far it had gone," she said. "Yes, you did," I replied, "because this wasn't something that just happened. It was something they chose, over and over again." "Mom," she said softly. I shook my head. "Don't call me that right now," I said again. Her shoulders dropped slightly, and for the first time, I saw something real in her expression. Not control, not calculation. Regret. But even that was complicated, because regret doesn't erase what's been done. "What happens now?" she asked. The question lingered between us, not as a challenge, but as uncertainty. And for the first time since all of this began, I realized something. This wasn't just my turning point. It was hers too. But that didn't mean I was responsible for fixing it. "I've already started the process," I said. "The bank is investigating." Her head snapped up. "Can't you stop it?" she asked quickly. There it was. "Not should you. Can you?" Because she was thinking about consequences, not accountability. "No," I said. Her face fell. "Mom, please no," I repeated. "You don't get to ask me to protect you from something you chose to do." Tears filled her eyes, and for a moment, my heart softened. Because she was still my daughter. But then I remembered the documents, the signatures, the lies, and the softness disappeared. "You need to understand something," I said. "This didn't just hurt me financially. It changed how I see you." She flinched. "I'm still your daughter," she whispered. I looked at her, long, carefully. And then I said the truth. "Yes," I said. "But you're not the person I thought you were." That broke something. I saw it, the moment the weight of everything finally hit her. But it was too late, because some things, once revealed, can't be unseen. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said through tears. "I believe you," I said. And I did, but intention doesn't undo impact. "I just thought," she continued, her voice shaking, "if I could fix things, if I could make it better." "You didn't fix anything," I said. I leaned forward slightly. "You made it worse." Silence filled the room again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was final, because there was nothing left to explain, nothing left to justify. Only consequences left to face. And as I sat there, looking at the woman in front of me, I realized something I hadn't fully accepted until now. This wasn't just about exposing them, it was about letting go of who I thought they were, of what I thought we had. And maybe that was the hardest part of all. 2 days later, everything unraveled. Not quietly, not gradually, but all at once. I was sitting in my living room when my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Olivia. It was Mr. Reed. Mrs. Morales, he said, his tone more formal than before. We've completed a preliminary review. My heart tightened. And I asked. There was a brief pause. Based on our findings, he said, we've identified multiple unauthorized transactions, forged documentation, and irregular account activity. The words landed like confirmation. Not suspicion, not theory. Fact. We've escalated this to our internal fraud department, he continued, and we've also notified legal authorities. I closed my eyes briefly. Legal authorities. This was no longer contained. This was no longer private. This was official. Thank you, I said quietly. Mrs. Morales, he added, you may want to be prepared. This process can move quickly. I understand, I replied, but I didn't think he understood what that really meant. Because for me, this wasn't just a process. It was the moment everything I had built with my family collapsed completely. I hung up the phone slowly, and for a moment, I just sat there, still, silent. Because even though I had pushed this forward, even though I had demanded the truth, I hadn't fully prepared for what it would feel like when it finally came. And then the knock came, loud, sharp, urgent. I didn't need to guess who it was. When I opened the door, Olivia and Mark were standing there. But they weren't the same. Gone was the control. Gone was the confidence. In its place, panic. What did you do? Olivia demanded immediately. I didn't step aside this time. I didn't invite them in. I told the truth, I said. Mark ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly on the porch. They contacted us, he said. The bank. Lawyers. They're talking about fraud charges. Charges. The word echoed. You knew that was a possibility, I said. No, we didn't think Olivia started. You didn't think I'd go this far? I finished. She stopped. Because that was the truth. You've blown this completely out of proportion, Mark snapped. I almost laughed. Out of proportion, I repeated. Yes, he said. This could have been handled privately. Within the family. Within the family. As if that word still meant something. You lost the right to call this a family matter, I said. Olivia's eyes filled with tears again. Mom, please, she said. You don't understand what's going to happen. No, I replied. You don't understand what already happened. She shook her head. We can fix this, she said quickly. We can pay it back. Every dollar. That made me pause. Not because it changed anything, but because it revealed something important. They were scared. Not of losing me, of losing everything else. How, I asked. She hesitated. Mark answered instead. We'll liquidate the investments, he said. The investments. The ones they had risked everything for. Are they even worth anything, I asked? His silence answered that question. Olivia looked at him, panic rising again. Mark, she whispered. He didn't respond, because the truth was already slipping out. They're gone, aren't they? I said quietly. Neither of them spoke, but I didn't need them to, because I could see it, in their faces, in their silence, in the way everything they had built their plan on had collapsed. You didn't just take my money, I said slowly. You lost it. Olivia's tears fell freely now. We thought it would work, she said. Thought. Past tense. Gone. I trusted you, I said. And for the first time, my voice broke. Not from weakness, but from the weight of it. I gave you everything. I continued. Not just money. Trust. Respect. My life. She stepped forward. I know, I said, stepping back. You don't, because if she did, this would never have happened. Mark's frustration turned into something sharper now. This isn't just about you, he said. This affects us too. Our future. Our reputation. Our reputation? I repeated. The irony hit so hard it almost felt surreal. You destroyed that the moment you decided to steal from me, I said. His jaw tightened. We didn't steal, he insisted. You took money that wasn't yours, I said, without permission, using forged documents. That's your interpretation, he said. No, I replied. That's the law. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. And then something shifted. Olivia stepped forward again. But this time, she wasn't defensive. She wasn't calculating. She was breaking. I was wrong, she said. The words came out quietly, but they carried more weight than anything she had said before. I was wrong, she repeated, about everything. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, I saw my daughter again. Not the woman who manipulated, not the person who justified, but the one who finally saw what she had done. I thought I was helping, she said. I thought I was protecting you. I thought... Her voice cracked. I thought I knew better. There it was, the truth. Not about the money, about the mindset. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had believed she had the right to. I'm sorry, she whispered. The apology hung in the air, fragile, late, incomplete. Because some apologies don't fix anything. They just acknowledge what's already broken. I believe you, I said, quietly. Her eyes lifted. Hope flickered, but I didn't let it grow. Being sorry doesn't change what you did, I continued. The hope faded, because this wasn't a moment of reconciliation. It was a moment of truth. I can't stop what's coming, I said. And I won't. Her shoulders slumped. Mark turned away, muttering something under his breath. Because for the first time, they weren't in control of the outcome. They were just participants in something they had created and now had to face. I stepped back toward the door. This is where I step out, I said. Olivia's voice trembled. Step out of what I met her eyes, out of this version of us. And with that, I closed the door. Not in anger, not in revenge, but in clarity. Because some endings aren't loud. They're quiet, final, and necessary. The next few weeks felt like living in two different worlds at the same time. One world was quiet, controlled, predictable. It was the one inside my home where I made my coffee in the morning, reviewed paperwork in the afternoon, and sat in silence at night, slowly rebuilding something I hadn't realized I had lost. Myself. The other world was chaos. Phone calls, emails, legal notices, meetings I never imagined I would have to attend. And at the center of it all was the truth finally being pulled into the light. The bank moved quickly, faster than I expected. Within days, their fraud department had contacted me again, asking for additional documents, signature samples, and a full statement of events. I gave them everything, every detail, every piece of evidence, every moment that led to this. because I wasn't protecting anyone anymore. And once that process started, it didn't stop. I was called into a formal review meeting at the bank. Mr. Reed was there along with two other individuals, one from their legal team, another from fraud investigations. They were polite, professional, but thorough, very thorough. Mrs. Morales. One of them said, "We've confirmed that the authorization form does not match your verified signature patterns." I nodded. I already knew. But hearing it stated that way officially made it real in a different way. Additionally, he continued, "We've traced the transferred funds to accounts directly linked to Olivia Carter and Mark Carter." That part still hurt, even though I expected it. Some of the funds were moved again into what appear to be investment channels, he added. Failed ones. I didn't need him to say it. I had already seen the truth in their faces. Based on these findings, he said, "We are proceeding with formal fraud documentation and legal escalation." Legal escalation. The words echoed in my mind, because now there was no stopping it, no turning back, not even if I wanted to. And part of me wondered, did I want to? That question stayed with me longer than I expected, because the truth is, justice isn't always simple when it involves people you love, or used to love. A few days later, I got my answer. I was at home when there was another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't Olivia. It wasn't Mark. It wasn't even someone I recognized. A woman stood there, mid-40s, composed, sharp eyes, professional posture. "Mrs. Chelsea Morales?" she asked. "Yes." She gave a small nod. "My name is Laura Bennett. I'm an investigator working alongside the bank's legal team." My heart slowed, not from fear, but from recognition. This was the next step. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. "Yes." She walked in, taking in the space briefly before setting her bag down. "I understand you've already provided documentation to the bank," she said, "but I'd like to go over a few details personally." "Of course," I replied. We sat across from each other at the table. She opened her folder, organized precise. "Let's start with your relationship with Olivia Carter," she said. And just like that, we went through everything. Not emotionally, not dramatically, fact by fact, timeline by timeline. Every moment broken down into something clear, something provable. When did she gain access? When did the transactions begin? When did I first notice irregularities? When did I confront her? It was strange, talking about something so personal in such a structured way. But it also did something I didn't expect. It removed the confusion, the doubt, the emotional fog, and replaced it with something else. Clarity. Laura listened carefully, occasionally asking precise questions, taking notes without interruption. When I finished, she closed her folder slowly. "Mrs. Morales," she said, "based on everything we've reviewed, this is a clear case of financial exploitation and fraud." The words were direct, unfiltered, and final. I nodded. "I understand." She studied me for a moment. "You've handled this very calmly," she said. I almost smiled. "It didn't feel calm," I replied. She gave a slight nod. "It rarely does," she said. There was a pause. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding. "Do you intend to pursue this fully?" I knew what she meant. Legal action, charges, consequences. For Olivia, for Mark. I looked down at my hands for a moment, then back up at her. "Yes," I said, because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about accountability. "This will likely result in formal charges," she said. "Possibly criminal." "I understand," I repeated. She nodded, closing her folder. "Then we'll proceed accordingly." As she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "One more thing," she said. I looked at her. "They didn't expect you to push back," she added. I let out a small breath. I know. She gave a faint, knowing look. They usually don't, she said, and then she left. I stood there for a moment after the door closed. The house felt different. Not empty, not heavy, just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has already passed, but before everything settles. Because even though the process had started, the emotional part of it wasn't over. Not yet. That night, I sat alone at my table again. No documents, no notes, just me. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel everything. The betrayal, the anger, the sadness, the loss. Not just of money, but of the version of my life I thought I had. But underneath all of that, there was something else. Something unexpected. Strength. Not the kind they thought I didn't have. The kind they never saw. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't prove, doesn't demand. It just stands and refuses to break. And as I sat there in the quiet of my own space, I realized something that changed everything. They didn't destroy me. They revealed me. The legal process didn't explode the way I once imagined it would. There were no dramatic courtroom scenes, no shouting, no sudden confessions. Instead, it unfolded slowly, methodically, like everything else in this story. But the impact, that was anything but quiet. Within a few weeks, the investigation turned into formal charges. Fraud, forgery, financial exploitation. Words that once felt distant, abstract, now attached to my own daughter's name. I didn't attend the first hearing. I couldn't. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't ready to see her like that. Not yet. Instead, I focused on what I could control. My life, my finances, my future. The bank worked with me to restore access to my accounts. They froze everything connected to the unauthorized transactions and began the recovery process. Some of the money was traceable, some of it wasn't. But that didn't matter as much as I thought it would, because somewhere along the way, I realized something. This wasn't about getting everything back. It was about taking myself back. I reopened accounts in my name only, reset every password, reviewed every document, and for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the divorce. Independence, not the kind you're forced into, the kind you choose. The house I was living in suddenly felt different too. Not temporary, not borrowed. Mine, completely mine. I started making small changes. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to remind myself that I was in control again. I rearranged the furniture, repainted the living room, replaced things I didn't like with things I did. It wasn't about aesthetics. It was about ownership. Every choice, mine. Every decision, mine. Every step, mine. And slowly, that feeling grew. Stronger, steadier. Until one morning, I woke up and realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I had been. The sharpness was gone. The constant replaying of everything that happened faded. Not completely, but enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to move forward. That didn't mean I forgave them. Not yet. Maybe not ever in the way people expect, but I also wasn't carrying them with me anymore. And that was freedom. The first time I saw Olivia again was not by choice. It was at a formal meeting arranged by her lawyer. I almost didn't go, but something inside me said I needed to. Not for her, for closure. When I walked into that room, she was already there. She looked smaller, not physically, but something about her presence had changed. The confidence was gone, replaced by something quieter, more uncertain. She looked up when I entered. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time folded in on itself. I saw the little girl again, then the woman she became, and then the person sitting in front of me now, all at once. "Hi," she said softly. I nodded. "Hi." We sat across from each other, lawyers on both sides, documents laid out between us. But none of that mattered, because the real conversation was happening in the silence. "I didn't think you'd come," she said. "I almost didn't," I replied. She looked down at her hands. "I'm glad you did." There was a pause. Then she spoke again. "I've had a lot of time to think," she said. I didn't respond. I just listened. About everything, she continued. About what I did. Why I did it. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Regret. Real this time. Real this. I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad, she said. That I was helping. That I would fix it. She looked up at me. But the truth is, I didn't respect you. The honesty of that statement caught me off guard. Not because I didn't know it, but because she finally said it. Out loud. "I thought I knew better," she continued. "I thought you needed me to take control." She shook her head slightly. "I was wrong." Yes, she was. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she said. That was new. Because before, she had. Subtly, indirectly. But now, she wasn't. "I just needed you to hear that," she added. I studied her for a moment, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger, or even hurt, just distance. "You've said it," I replied. She nodded slowly. And that was it. No dramatic reconciliation, no emotional breakthrough, just acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's all there is. The meeting ended shortly after. Legal terms were discussed. Repayment plans outlined. Consequences defined. But I barely registered any of it. Because my part was already done. When I walked out of that building, the air felt lighter. Not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't carrying it anymore. I got into my car and sat there for a moment, hands resting in my lap. And then I smiled. Not because anything was funny, but because something inside me had shifted. For years, I had defined myself by my role. Wife, mother, caretaker. The one who held everything together. But now I understood something deeper. I wasn't those roles. I was the person who chose them, and that meant I could choose differently. I could choose peace. I could choose distance. I could choose myself. And for the first time in a long time, that choice felt clear. Not forced, not reactive, intentional. As I started the car and drove away, I didn't look back. Not at the building, not at the past, not at the version of my life that had already ended, because ahead of me was something I hadn't allowed myself to imagine before. A life that belonged only to me. And this time, no one else would take that away. There's a moment in every storm when the noise finally stops. Not because everything is fixed, not because the damage disappears, but because the wind has passed through and what's left is silence. That's where I found myself, standing in the quiet aftermath of everything I had lost and everything I had reclaimed. Months had passed since the investigation began. Long enough for the legal process to run its course. Long enough for the truth to settle into something permanent. Olivia and Mark faced the consequences. Not dramatic ones. Not the kind that make headlines, but real ones. Legal penalties, financial restitution, reputational damage. The kind of consequences that don't just affect a moment, but reshape a life. I didn't attend the final proceedings. I didn't need to. Because by then, my closure didn't come from watching them fall. It came from standing on my own. I got the call from Laura Bennett instead. "It's done," she said simply. No details, no elaboration, just done. I thanked her, and when I hung up the phone, I didn't feel relief the way I thought I would. I felt stillness, the kind that comes when something heavy has finally been set down, not thrown away, not forgotten, but no longer carried. That evening, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea watching the sun dip below the horizon. It was a simple moment, quiet, unremarkable. But it meant more to me than anything else. Because for the first time in a long time, there was no tension in my chest. No questions spinning in my mind. No weight pulling me backward. Just peace. Not perfect peace, not complete, but real. And enough. I thought about everything that had happened. The divorce, the betrayal, the manipulation, the loss. And strangely, I didn't feel bitterness, not in the way I expected, because somewhere along the way, something shifted. I stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And started asking, what did this show me? And the answer came quietly. It showed me who people really are when they think you're at your weakest. It showed me how easily trust can be mistaken for permission. It showed me that love without respect is not love at all. But more importantly, it showed me something about myself, that I was stronger than I thought. Not loud, not aggressive, not forceful, but steady, clear, unshakable when it mattered most. I used to think strength looked like holding everything together. Now I know. Sometimes strength is letting things fall apart and choosing not to fall with them. I still hear from Olivia sometimes. Short messages, careful words, apologies that come slower now. More measured, more real. I don't ignore them, but I don't rush toward them either. Because rebuilding something like that takes more than regret. It takes time, consistency, and truth. Maybe one day we'll find a version of each other again, not the one we lost, but something new, something honest. And if that happens, it will be a choice, not an obligation. As for Daniel, he faded into the background of my life, just like the marriage had long before it ended. And for once, that felt right. No anger, no resentment, just distance and peace. I've started doing things I used to put off. Small things, simple things. I take walks in the morning. I joined a local book club. I even signed up for a financial mentoring program helping women who feel lost after major life changes. Because I understand that feeling now. The confusion, the doubt, The way the ground can disappear beneath your feet without warning. And if I can help even one person see clearly again, then maybe everything I went through won't just be something I survived. It will be something that mattered. Sometimes people ask me if I regret anything, if I wish I had done something differently, and the answer is no, because every step, even the painful ones, led me here, to this version of myself, stronger, wiser, clearer. Not because life became easier, but because I learned how to stand when it wasn't. And if there's one thing I know for certain now, it's this: the people who think you're weak are often the ones who don't understand what real strength looks like. They expect noise, reaction, collapse. But real strength? It's quiet. It's patient. It waits. And when the moment comes, it stands. Unapologetically, completely, and without needing anyone else to believe in it, because it already believes in itself. I took a slow sip of my tea, watching the last light disappear from the sky. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled without hesitation. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people we trusted the most. And when that happens, it's easy to question yourself, to wonder if you missed something, if you were too trusting, too kind, too willing to believe the best in others. But here's the truth. Being kind is not weakness. Trusting people is not failure. Loving your family is not a mistake. The mistake belongs to those who choose to take advantage of it. Real strength isn't about never being hurt. It's about what you do after you are hurt. It's about choosing clarity over denial, courage over comfort, and truth over silence. Chelsea's journey shows us that even when everything seems to fall apart, you can still reclaim your life piece by piece. You can set boundaries. You can walk away. You can rebuild something stronger, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. And most importantly, you can learn to stand on your own, without needing validation from the people who once doubted you. So, I want to ask you, have you ever been underestimated by someone close to you? Did you stay silent? Or did you find your voice? Share your story in the comments. I read every one. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe. You never know who might need to hear this today.